It was 11:10 at night. My husband slapped me across the face because there was no dinner on the table. He shouted, "Get your behind in the kitchen and cook right now, woman!" I stayed silent and went into the kitchen for 20 minutes. When I came back with a covered silver tray, they thought it was a delicious meal. But when I lifted the lid, the contents were not food, but a one-way ticket to their own personal hell on earth. The wall clock in the living room marked 11:10 at night. Outside, the street was buried in deep silence. The only sound was the faint friction of my car tires on the asphalt of the driveway. My body felt crushed. I had spent the entire day at the office dealing with mountains of audit reports that had to be ready by the next morning. My head throbbed with a piercing pain, as if a hammer were hitting me over and over again. Still, I forced myself to sketch a light smile. I imagined the soft bed waiting for me in a few moments. I just wanted to take a hot shower and sleep without interruptions. I turned off the car engine and walked reluctantly toward the front door. The house keys jingled in my hand, which was trembling slightly from exhaustion. When I opened the door, a blast of cold air from the air conditioner hit me in the face. Strange. Normally at this hour, the living room lights were already off, but this time everything was illuminated with a bright light. Suddenly, I had a bad feeling. My steps stopped at the threshold when I saw 3 people sitting on the living room sofa with indecipherable looks. Marcus, my husband, sat in the center with his legs crossed arrogantly. To his right, Loretta, my mother-in-law, looked at me with sharp, accusing eyes, and to his left, Chantel, my sister-in-law, was playing with her phone, although every now and then she shot me a look with a cynical smile. Before I could say hello, Marcus jumped up and strode toward me. His face was red with rage and his jaw was clenched. I could see the veins in his neck popping out, a sign that he was about to explode. "Honey, I just got home." I hadn't finished the sentence when a hard slap landed on my left cheek. The sound was so crisp it broke the silence of the night in the living room. A stinging sensation and intense heat spread across my face instantly. My head turned to the side from the force of the blow. I stood paralyzed. The exhaustion I felt in my body seemed to vanish, replaced by overwhelming shock. My right hand trembled as I touched my cheek, which was starting to feel numb. I looked at Marcus, trying to find a shred of remorse in his eyes, but there was nothing, only the glint of explosive fury. "Have you seen what time it is, you cheap tramp?" Marcus screamed directly in my face. His spit even splattered onto my blouse. "Who do you think you are to come in at this hour? Out partying while your husband is at home?" I tried to hold back the tears fighting to come out. "Marcus, I've been working overtime. You know it's the end of the month. I have a ton of work. Besides, I sent you a text this afternoon," I replied with a trembling voice, but struggling to stay calm. I didn't want to look weak in front of them. "Excuses!" Loretta interrupted with a shrill voice. The woman got up from the sofa and pointed a finger in my face. "What kind of wife are you? We've been sitting here for an hour, starving. There is nothing on the table. The pots are empty. In the fridge there is only cold water. Do you want your husband and me to die of starvation?" "Hey," Chantel intervened without taking her eyes off her phone screen, as if I were less important than whatever she was seeing on her social media. "A little self-criticism, right? Keisha, Marcus is tired from being at home all day. The least a wife can do when coming home from work is bring food or cook, not come back empty-handed." Wow, how useless. I looked at them one by one. Marcus, unemployed for 6 months because he was fired for embezzling company funds, although he always told the neighbors he was starting his own business. Loretta, who asked me for thousands of dollars every month for her expenses and her meetings with friends, but was incapable of lifting a single dirty plate in this house. And Chantel, a 25-year-old girl whose only job was sleeping, eating, and online shopping with my additional credit card. All of them lived off my sweat. All of them breathed under the roof of a house whose mortgage I paid every month. And now they were yelling at me because I was late home to make them dinner. "Get to the kitchen at once, woman!" Marcus bellowed again, this time shoving me roughly by the shoulder until I stumbled and crashed into the shoe rack. "And don't come out of the kitchen until there is decent food on the table. And be careful, if it doesn't taste good, I'll smash the plate in your face." I took a deep breath, trying to stifle the rage starting to burn in my chest. I was dying to scream, to vomit all the frustration I had kept inside for so long. I was dying to kick them out of the house right then and there. But no, anger would only ruin my plan. I needed calm to pay them back in the most painful way possible, an elegant revenge they would never forget for the rest of their lives. I straightened up and fixed my clothes. I looked Marcus directly in the eyes. There was no longer fear or sadness in my gaze, only an empty coldness. "All right," I said in a low but firm voice. "I am going to prepare a special dish for you, the one you deserve most tonight." Without waiting for their reply, I walked past Marcus, ignoring Loretta's look of contempt and Chantel's mocking laugh. I walked straight toward the kitchen, the place where I normally spent hours serving them as if I were their maid. But tonight would be different. Tonight the aroma of delicious food would not come out of this kitchen. Tonight this kitchen would become the place where I would prepare their ruin. Upon reaching the kitchen, I closed the door firmly. I leaned my back against it and closed my eyes for a moment to gather strength. The stinging on my cheek was still there, but the pain in my heart was much more unbearable. During our 5 years of marriage, I had always tried to be a devoted wife. I turned a blind eye to Marcus's laziness. I endured Loretta's criticism and gave in to Chantel's whims. I thought that with patience, they would change. How wrong I was. My patience had only fed the monsters inside them. They became greedier, crueler, and more brazen. I opened my eyes. The tears I had held back dried up. It wasn't worth crying for parasites like them. I went to a drawer in a corner of the kitchen where I kept the important things I had been hiding. It was enough. This family drama had to end this very night. The sound of a knife hitting a cutting board resonated loudly. Chop, chop, chop. The rhythm filled the kitchen, piercing through the walls until it reached the living room. I knew exactly what they were thinking out there. They were surely smiling with satisfaction, feeling victorious for having broken me once again. They must have thought the stupid, scared wife had started chopping onions or meat in a hurry to satisfy their spoiled stomachs. But on the kitchen counter, there wasn't a single ingredient. The big knife was just hitting the empty board over and over again. It was part of the show. I wanted them to feel on top of the world before throwing them into the deepest abyss. While I kept making that fake noise, my other hand was busy preparing the real dish. I took a large silver tray that we normally only used at Christmas or big family celebrations. The tray shone under the kitchen light. On it, I did not place plates with rice or stews. There was no pot roast, no chicken soup, no stir-fried vegetables, which was what they usually demanded. Instead, I took a thick folder out of a secret drawer under the sink, a folder I had been preparing for 3 months, waiting for the right moment to bring it to light. I opened it and took out 3 key documents. First, the property deed to this house. Back in the day, the house was bought with my savings. However, Marcus forced me to put his name on it too, so he would feel valued as the head of the household. But last month, after paying the final mortgage installment with my annual bonus, I secretly took care of changing the title so it would be solely in my name. The process was complicated and expensive, but luckily I had a trusted lawyer acquaintance who worked fast and without Marcus finding out. This document was proof that every brick, every tile, and every inch of land on this property belonged to me. Second, the divorce papers. The paper was already complete with my signature above the corresponding line. It detailed all the grounds for divorce: verbal abuse, physical abuse, the one that had just happened and which, luckily, had been recorded by the security camera I installed last week in the living room, and financial abandonment. I was sick of supporting a man whose only talent was giving orders. Third, a stack of bank statements as thick as a notebook. I had marked with a highlighter pen each of the transfers that had gone out of my account to fund their lifestyle. Marcus's car payment, the monthly money for Loretta's expenses that she used for her high society teas, Chantel's credit card bills for buying designer bags and shoes, and even the money for Marcus's cigarettes and gas. Everything was meticulously recorded. The sum was astronomical, enough to buy a small apartment in the suburbs. This was the irrefutable proof that I was the economic pillar of this family, wasn't I, Marcus? I placed the 3 documents carefully on the tray, the deed in the center, the divorce papers on the left, and the bank statements on the right. Then I covered it all with a shiny silver dome. Perfect! From the outside, it looked like a luxury dinner from a 5-star restaurant. I looked at my watch. Exactly 20 minutes had passed. It was time for the main event. I lifted the tray with both hands. It didn't weigh as much as the burden I had carried all these years. However, I felt it was the most beautiful load I had ever carried. I took a deep breath, put on an impassive face, and pushed the kitchen door open. In the dining room, the 3 of them were already sitting around the table. Their faces reflected impatience, knife and fork in hand, ready to devour whatever I had prepared for them. Upon seeing me come out with the large covered tray, Loretta's eyes shone. "That's how I like it," she said with disdain as she settled into her chair. "A wife has to be diligent. It's not enough to earn money. The stomachs of the husband and mother-in-law come first." Marcus huffed, his face still sour from the rage earlier. "You took an eternity. I hope the food is worth it. If it's bland, get ready to cook again." Chantel even craned her neck. "What's inside, sis? It's weird that it doesn't smell like anything from here. You didn't just make pasta, did you?" I didn't answer a single word. I placed the tray right in the center of the table with a slow, solemn movement. The sound of the tray touching the glass of the table silenced them for a moment. I stood at the head of the table, looking at them one by one with an expression that made Marcus frown. Perhaps he noticed the drastic change in my aura. "Go ahead," I said briefly. "This is the best dish I can offer you tonight. Eat until you are full." Impatient, Marcus reached out and lifted the silver dome abruptly. "Let's see what is." His sentence was left hanging. The sound of the dome being deposited on the table resonated loudly in the middle of a sudden, tense silence. There was no hot steam, no aroma of spices to whet the appetite. On the tray, there was only a stack of papers. Marcus's eyes widened like saucers as he looked at them. He squinted, trying to read what was on the top document. His face, which was previously red with anger, now turned pale little by little as he recognized the letterhead and the title of the document. "What the hell is this?" His voice trembled, not from anger, but from confusion and rising panic. Loretta, who was far-sighted, picked up the thickest bundle of papers. "Where is the food? Why are you giving us newspapers? Have you gone crazy, Keisha?" But when she saw the figures highlighted on the bank statements, her eyes widened. What is this?" Chantel, faster, grabbed the divorce papers directly, read them over quickly, and then looked at me with her mouth open. "Marcus, Keisha wants a divorce!" she shrieked hysterically. The situation exploded immediately. Marcus slammed the house deed against the table. He stood up, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Divorce papers? Who do you think you are to divorce me, you ungrateful wife? And this deed, why does only your name appear? Where is mine? You tricked me!" I smiled. A very sweet smile, but one that felt cold and piercing. "Eat reality, Marcus, Loretta, Chantel. Fill yourselves up looking at those numbers. That is the amount of my money you have eaten all this time," I said, looking Marcus directly in the eyes. "This house is legally mine. The original deed is already safely in a bank deposit box since this morning. That is just a photocopy, so tearing it up is useless." Then I turned to Loretta, who was starting to tremble while holding the bank statements. "And in this very instant, I am kicking you all out of my house." "With what right do you kick us out?" Loretta shouted. Her voice was so high-pitched my ears rang. "This is my son's house. Marcus is the head of the household here. You are just a guest." "Head of the household?" I laughed softly, a laugh that sounded bitter. What head of the household supports his family with his wife's money? What head of the household allows his mother to insult his own wife? For your information, Loretta, Marcus hasn't contributed a single cent to this house for a year. Even the electricity lighting the lamp above your head right now is paid for by me." Marcus growled with clenched fists, ready to hit me again. He started to circle the table, approaching me with the clear intention of hurting me. "You witch! Take back what you said, or I'm going to—" "You're going to what?" I challenged him. I didn't step back. On the contrary, I lifted my chin, daring him. "You want to hit me again? Go ahead. The security camera in that corner already recorded your slap earlier in the living room. Just one more touch and the recording will be sent automatically to the cloud and to my lawyer's phone. In addition to the divorce suit, do you want to add a criminal charge for domestic violence?" Marcus's step stopped dead. He looked up and saw the small camera with a blinking red light in the corner of the room. His face transformed into a mixture of fear and deep hatred. He realized he had fallen into my trap. "Get out," I said coldly. "Now." The silence my threat had created lasted only a few seconds before shattering into 1,000 pieces, turning into a deafening uproar. Loretta was the first to lose control. The old woman, who normally cared so much about her image as an elegant lady in front of her friends, was now howling like a woman possessed. She swept all the papers off the table with her wrinkled hands, scattering them across the floor. Her face was soaked in tears of rage, not sadness. She felt her pride trampled by the daughter-in-law she had always considered little more than a walking ATM. She didn't accept the reality that the luxury she enjoyed was going to disappear in an instant. Loretta pounded the dining table with her palms over and over again. Her voice sounded hoarse as she screamed accusations at me, calling me a scammer. She claimed I had manipulated Marcus, used black magic, or tricked her son in a moment of weakness to seize his assets. Her accusations seemed ridiculous to me. How was I going to trick Marcus to take his wealth if he had nothing? Everything in this house, from the silverware to the car in the garage, had been bought with the sweat of my brow. But logic didn't seem to apply to those panicking about losing their source of livelihood. Marcus, who had been paralyzed by the threat of the camera, now paced back and forth in the dining room like a caged beast. He pulled his hair in frustration. His bulging eyes looked for an escape, a way to turn the situation around. He picked up the photocopy of the house deed from the floor, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it at me. The hit was soft. It barely bounced off my shoulder, but it showed how powerless he felt. He knew he had no legal basis to object. The documents were authentic, the bank statements were real, and he knew perfectly well that he had lived off my money all this time. Chantel, my spoiled sister-in-law, reacted in a different way, but just as irritating. She didn't scream or get furious, but burst into hysterical tears while hugging the designer purse she had bought the week before. Of course, with my credit card, she begged her brother to do something. She was afraid of ending up on the street, of not being able to show off on social media anymore, of her friends discovering that she wasn't actually rich. Her pitiful crying gave me more of a headache, but at the same time produced a strange satisfaction. Finally, that girl felt fear for the future, that same fear that had tormented me every time I saw her credit card bills. I let them vent for a few minutes. I remained motionless at the end of the table with my arms crossed, enjoying the spectacle of the destruction of a family of parasites. When I considered it was enough, I walked to a corner of the room where I had hidden something behind the long curtains. I pulled out 3 large black garbage bags, the biggest ones, filled to the bursting point. I dragged them to the center of the room. The sound of plastic brushing against the tiled floor made them turn around. With all my strength, I threw the bags at them one by one. Thump, thump, thump. The 3 enormous bags landed at their feet. Marcus jumped, surprised. Loretta stopped howling, and Chantel paused her crying for a moment. They looked at the garbage bags with bewilderment. A faint smell of mothballs escaped from them, mixed with a dusty scent. "Those are your things," I said in a flat tone, devoid of emotion. "I gathered them this afternoon while you were out shopping. Clothes, pants, shoes, and your personal items that I considered important are inside. The rest, what seemed like trash to me, or things I bought with my money, but you don't deserve to take, I threw in the dumpster or kept to sell. Don't bother going up to your rooms. They are already locked, and I threw away the keys. You don't have access to any other part of this house except this dining room and the exit door." Chantel screamed hysterically and ripped open one of the plastic bags.
The contents spilled onto the floor. Wrinkled clothes rolled up in any which way, several pairs of shoes piled without their boxes, and cosmetics thrown in without a bag. She cried even harder seeing her collection of expensive clothes treated like garbage. She protested, saying her clothes would get ruined folded like that, but I didn't care. To me, they were simply junk that had to be out of my house as soon as possible. Loretta looked at me with disbelief, as if I had just turned into a monster. She brought her hand to her chest, pretending she was having a heart attack. She began to breathe with difficulty, hoping I would soften and cancel the eviction. Before, that trick always worked. Every time I got angry, she pretended to be sick, and I ended up apologizing and taking care of her. But this time, I just looked at her coldly. I knew the results of her last medical checkup from last month. Her heart was perfectly healthy. The only thing sick was her soul, full of envy and resentment. Marcus tried to approach again, this time with a pleading and fake tone. He lowered his voice and tried to touch my hand, but I pulled it away abruptly. He started talking about our good memories, the vows we made, what the neighbors would say if we divorced. He was trying to manipulate my feelings using his old weapons, pity and the fear of gossip. But he forgot that the heart of a repeatedly wounded woman eventually freezes and becomes as hard as a rock. There was no longer any crack through which Marcus could enter. I looked at my watch. 5 minutes had passed since my ultimatum. I took my phone out of my dress pocket, typed a couple of times, and showed them the screen displaying the emergency call button to the gated community's security booth. I looked at Marcus steadily, giving him a final, non-negotiable warning. My patience had run out, and I didn't want to waste any more time with this cheap drama. "Now take those garbage bags and drag them out of my house," I ordered firmly. "If you are still here in 10 seconds, I will press this button. The community security guards will come and remove you by force. Imagine the shame of being dragged out like thieves in front of all the neighbors. The choice is yours. Do you walk out on your own feet with the little dignity you have left, or do you leave by force with a free show for the whole neighborhood? 1, 2, 3. Marcus stood paralyzed. His face was pale as paper. He looked at me, searching for some doubt in my eyes, but found none. He saw deadly seriousness. With trembling hands, he grabbed one of the large plastic bags. He yelled at Chantel to stop crying and help him carry the things. He also pulled his mother's hand, who was still faking an asthma attack, to get her up. Finally, they realized I wasn't joking. The queen of the house had awakened, and her orders were absolute. The front door of the house opened wide, revealing the dense darkness of the night. A strong wind slipped inside, bringing with it the first drops of rain that began to fall heavily. The sky seemed to bless my plan to clean the house of all filth, because a storm broke out just as they took their first step outside. The sound of thunder rumbled in the distance, in time with the beating of my heart.